These are some morbid facts about Stephen King. When he was a young boy, Stephen witnessed one of his best friends get struck and killed by a train, but he has no recollection of the event. King's family said that after leaving to play with the boy, he returned home speechless and in shock. Many believe this event may have psychologically inspired some of King's darker works, though he refuses to comment on it. In 1999, King was struck by a minivan and nearly killed by the distracted driver. Stephen later bought the van so that he could destroy it, and the driver of the van happened to die on King's birthday the next year, September 21st. The greatest horror writer in history claims that he constantly lives in fear. His long list of phobias include flying, snakes, rats, spiders, squishy things, deformities, death, closed-in spaces, and the dark. King would do so much cocaine while writing that he had to stuff cotton up his nose to prevent blood from dripping on his typewriter. There are various books that he doesn't even remember writing, including the 1981 classic Cujo.
Breaking news, a real-life Michael Myers has been attacking people. Authorities say they received 3 calls separately on Monday evening. The first call came in shortly before 6 p.m. The victim told officers that a person was armed with a hammer and demanded their cell phone. About 15 minutes later, a second victim made a phone call and said that a suspect was chasing them for a short distance and then stopped. However, when the victim returned to their vehicle, they found that their window had been smashed. The third incident took place near a home just after 7 p.m. The man reported while walking through the neighborhood he was attacked, and after the attack he realized his wallet was missing. All 3 of the incidents described the suspect arriving and departing in an older gray or silver sedan. The victims all 3 gave the same description of the suspect, including a white Halloween mask, which they described as, quote, a Michael Myers mask. Here's a look where the incidents all took place in Omaha, Nebraska. I'll keep you guys updated. What do you think? Drop in the comments.
In 2018, this firefighter passed away from supposedly drowning, but 5 years later, watch how the story takes a turn. Jesse Reed, who was a firefighter, was found in the Tennessee River along with his Jeep after his wife Mary Ellen reported him missing back in March 2018. The medical examiner at the time said that he suffered blunt force trauma and passed away from drowning. But oddly, no one was ever held responsible for Jesse's death. As we know, we always look at the people closest to the victim. And 5 years later, Mary has been closely investigated. Not only has her story been extremely inconsistent, she told investigators at the time that her and Jesse went trail riding, but she couldn't recall a 2-hour time period between leaving the house and getting to the trail. And not surprisingly, Mary tried to collect Jesse's life insurance payout as soon as he passed away, but the judge said nope. Jesse's friends and family have been waiting years for answers, so they've kindly asked me to share his story so that we can get more eyes on this case. So please like and share so we can help the Reed family.
Proof that animals are evolving, Part 4. This video from an Ontario aquarium shows the incredible intelligence of an orca whale. He spits out some fish that he was given for food and sinks back into the water in front of a flock of seagulls. When one of the birds eventually takes the bait, the orca immediately grabs it, earning himself a much bigger meal. Here's a video of a Miami Zoo gorilla telling visitors in sign language that they're not allowed to feed him. Elephants in Thailand have learned to exploit their right-of-way by forcing sugarcane trucks to stop so that they can steal a snack. This goes to show why elephants are considered to be one of the most intelligent animals in the world. Archaeologists have discovered dwarf crocodiles living in remote caves in the African country of Gabon. After living in complete darkness for a few generations, their skin is turned orange and they are almost completely blind. These weird cave crocodiles may be in the process of evolving into an entirely new species.
Everyone is talking about how scary nuns are, but no one is talking about how scandalous nuns used to be. We forget that nunneries were full of girls in their early 20s, and you could expect to find the same amount of drama and experimentation you would have found in the dorms at Barnard, if you know what I mean. So let me tell you a scandalous story. And if interested, I have another nun story that is very scandalous, but way more demonic on my Patreon. So back in the 1850s at this convent in Rome, there's a nun named Maria Luisa. And one day she comes to the other nuns and she's like, hey, there's this guy in town, he's possessed by the devil, he needs my help. So in the dead of night, she goes to help this possessed man, and when she comes back in the morning, the other nuns notice that she's covered in like scratches and bruises. And Maria Luisa is like, oh yeah, the devil has really taken over this guy. That was a really intense exorcism I had to do. Meanwhile, there's this other nun there named Catherine, and she's like, no, this girl is just fully hooking up with this guy. So Catherine starts telling this theory to the other nuns just to kind of see if anyone else agrees with her. And a few days later, she gets sick, like on her deathbed sick. Maria Luisa offers to take care of her and she's like bringing her soup and stuff. And Catherine notices that she feels the worst after she has the soup. And she kind of starts to catch on to the fact that Luisa is poisoning her, probably because she's been talking shit. So one night, Luisa comes over and Catherine's basically like, listen, I'll stop running my mouth if you stop poisoning me. I know what you're doing. And then they just went back to being nuns. Like, that's just what life was like in the convents. My Patreon episode this week is about a group of teenage girls that all get possessed by the devil, and it's maybe to take down a man. It's a trip if you have the time.
This is what happened to this fiancé that went missing 6 days before her wedding day. On September 8th, 2009, 24-year-old Annie Lay vanished while attending Yale, where she studied pharmacology. Not only was Annie completing graduate school, but she was also working at Yale's Animal Research Center. On this night, Annie's roommate became extremely worried when she failed to come home. Her roommate immediately reported Annie missing, and when police took a look at the surveillance footage, Annie was seen entering the Animal Research building at around 10 a.m. but was never seen leaving. When police entered the lab that Annie was in, they found her personal items, but she was nowhere to be found. At first, investigators believed that Annie got cold feet and ran away because her wedding was in a couple of days. But when investigators discovered that 24-year-old lab technician Raymond Clark was the only person who had access to Annie's lab room that day, they started to take a closer look at him. Investigators began looking into all the data from everyone's access cards, and they discovered that not only did Annie not leave the building that day, but she also entered room G13 and she never left that room either. But that's not all. They also noticed that Raymond used his access card 55 times that day to go in and out of the labs. Bloodstains, Raymond's DNA, and a piece of clothing that Annie wore on that day were also found in the lab room. And a few days after Annie's disappearance, the building began to smell like human decomposition. Cadaver dogs led investigators into a restroom in front of the lab room, and Annie's body was found behind a toilet inside a panel. And get this, Annie's body was found on the same day that she was supposed to get married. It's believed that Raymond took Annie's life because he wanted to be with her and because her wedding was coming up. Raymond was sentenced to 44 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
Showing you all my Saw props and memorabilia part 3. This is one of the cult classic figures of John Kramer from Saw 2. Unfortunately, this one is not still in the box, but I do have his pig variant. I love this. This is promotional dental floss for Saw 3. All of this promotion related to a teeth trap that's not even in the movie, but it's really funny to me. My Billy the Puppet Funko Pop. My living dead doll of Billy the Puppet. Now, this next thing, Saw has a lot of different variants in their DVD packages. So for convenience, I do have the first 8 in a Blu-ray little travel kit. I do have the individually packaged Jigsaw on Blu-ray. I do have the Blu-ray collector's edition of Spiral from the Book of Saw, as well as the Best Buy exclusive 4K Steelbook for Spiral. I just thought this cover looked super sick. They also did a re-release of the original Saw with a 4K Steelbook, and I got that as well. Then for the OG 7 movies, I have them in the classic clear cases where you can see through the DVDs. One of the vases used in the mausoleum trap in Saw 4. Part 4 eventually.
Morbid Facts, Part 138. David Vetter, aka Bubble Boy, was born in 1971 with a severe immune disorder where he basically had no immune system at all, meaning even the most harmless germs could kill him. Because of this, he spent his entire life inside of a bubble and could receive air, water, and food only if it had been sterilized first. At age 12, David received a bone marrow transplant from his sister, the only treatment available that would potentially allow him outside of his bubble. But the marrow sadly contained traces of a dormant virus, and David passed away a few months later. Flash forward to 2001, they made a dark comedy movie starring Jake Gyllenhaal that was inspired by this true story of Bubble Boy. Juan Catalan was put on death row and spent 6 months in prison for the murder of a teenage girl. He was the prime suspect only until his lawyer came across some unused footage from Curb Your Enthusiasm. The footage miraculously proved that Catalan had been at a Dodgers game with his daughter at the time of the murder.
Oh, you son of a bitch. Now, I wasn't gonna talk about this because TikTok will probably ban me for this. But please don't. This is just my opinion and my point of view. So for the people that don't know what's going on with this Palestine-Israel thing, let me explain. And for the people that are in doubt, share this video to them. And if you think I'm wrong or you think I'm right, I want you to put in the comments so I know just where I'm at. So the parts in pink, they're saying nobody even go there. The parts in orange, they're saying reconsider going there. Oh, you son of a bitch. This is meant to be the Holy Land, right? Jerusalem and them, man. Brother, that is Palestine. It's stolen land. We are watching people have their land stolen in front of us. But I don't see nobody doing peace marches. I don't see nobody saying, oh, poor you guys. Israel hits Gaza with one of the deadliest nights of bombings so far. I mean, come on, brother. Ain't this meant to be the Holy Land? Shouldn't we be praying about this? Where's Jesus? Where's Jesus? This is what happens when you're late, Jesus. This is meant to be Jerusalem, the Jews, Israel, the Holy Land. How are these holy men dropping bombs? Just use your brain, people. I don't want to talk too much because I can't say what I want to say. But that place is called Palestine. How are the Palestinians the bad guys? How is Israel still considered as a holy place? History is false. So when you read the Bible and the Bible says, you know, Jesus came from Israel, you mean he came from Palestine? And you know, if you're a Christian, if you're a peace marcher, how are you not standing up for this? Where the Christians at? Oh, I know where you guys are. But anyway, people, I don't want to talk too much. I shouldn't have done this video. But Israel is not a real place. The place is called Palestine. And the way they're bombing up this place, and you guys ain't saying nothing, it just shows who's the sheep and who are the leaders.
Morbid Facts, Part 364. When Theo Von was born in 1980, his dad Roland was 70 years old. Theo says he was always afraid to develop a relationship with Roland because he knew his dad would die when he was at a young age. His father ended up dying in an accidental shooting accident when Theo was 16 years old. British man Andrew Haig was sentenced to life in prison earlier this year after beating his 50-year-old neighbor to death with a bag of Pokemon cards. The two had gotten into an argument after Haig's neighbor accused him of being a pedophile. In 2012, Texas nurse Kimberly Sains was sentenced to life in prison after killing 5 of her patients by injecting bleach into their dialysis lines. Here are some of the distress calls that were painted onto houses during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Many refused to evacuate their homes because they weren't allowed to bring any pets into sheltering areas. The Category 5 hurricane ended up taking the lives of around 1,400 people and 500,000 pets.
Just when I thought I heard about all the worst cults in history, this one had to come and blow them out of the water. This is Colonia Dignidad. They were a German torture cult hiding out in the Chilean wilderness after World War II, aka Yazis. And to show you how terrible they were, let me tell you a story. As a quick reminder, if you want more info, you can check out the podcast. The leader of this cult was a known child abuser, and he wanted more Chilean boys to be brought to him. So he started a hospital in the community and used it as a trafficking system to get more children. One day, a young Chilean boy choked and was rushed to the hospital. And right when he got there, a nurse scooped him up, brought him to a room, and saved his life. But later that day, his sister arrived and asked a nurse when she could pick him up to take him home. And the nurse responded that they needed to monitor him for a few more days, which is pretty suspect in a choking case. So a few days later, she comes back and she's like, okay, can I get my brother? And the nurse tells her that he's not there anymore. And this is because the hospital had lawyers on staff that were drafting up adoption paperwork when young boys would come in. The cult was able to legally adopt boys in the community without the parents' consent, and the parents had not enough money to do anything about it. There are so many more stories about this place, and I had never heard of it before, so make sure you check out this week's episode for more info.
It's how everyday life in medieval London could turn deadly. Callous disposal of eelskins. Welcome to the new series where I try to solve real murders from medieval London. And oh my god, already? I was hoping we would have a bit longer before we'd have to deal with a dead body, I'm not gonna lie to you. I had an itinerary. It is August 15th, 1326, the Feast of Assumption, and eel seller Roger Stuywood's body has been discovered beaten and left for dead. But who would want to kill humble eel vendor Roger? Luckily, it appears the sheriffs of London are already on the case, and a jury has been assembled of men to shine a light on the events leading up to Roger's death. And in an unbelievable turn of events, 2 Cheapside shopkeepers are the prime suspects. As the clock struck 6 a.m, Roger was walking through Cordwainer Street, carrying his bucket of eels for sale. Roger made the decision that would lead to his untimely demise and threw down his eelskins. A quarrel arose when 2 shopkeepers, Simon and Richard, took offence to Roger's eelskins littering the street, and Richard struck Roger with his palm. Not satisfied by this jolly rogering of Roger, Simon followed him to a churchyard and kicked him while he lay helpless. Roger died from his injuries, and as word spread of his untimely death, Richard did give himself up at Newgate, but Simon, despite his aiding and abetting, refused to surrender and has not been seen since. And that is
Morbid Facts, Part 137. This was the mugshot of Ohio grandma Charlene Thompson after she poured hot grease on a woman during an argument. The victim suffered severe burns to her back and arm after the two apparently didn't see eye to eye. Sloths only have enough energy for their weekly toilet trip to the jungle floor. So if their baby ever falls to the ground, they must choose to preserve their energy and leave it to be eaten. A horrific bungee cord accident caused this man's iris to completely collapse. This famous mummy found in Pompeii appeared to be satisfying himself during his final moments in 79 AD. In medieval Germany, a divorcing couple could legally settle their disputes with a marital duel. The man was given a weapon but had to fight out of a hole with one hand tied behind his back, while the woman could move freely with a rock-filled sack but had to wear a weighted suit. If the husband lost, he was beheaded, and if the wife lost, she was buried alive.
Welcome back to Did They Deserve It?, where I go over every character that's ever been put into a Saw trap and determine whether they deserve to be put in the trap and if they deserve the fate that they got. Today we're talking about Cecilia from Saw X. Cecilia's crimes span over 8 years. She is pretending to be a doctor with these medical cures for cancer and various diseases. However, she is just ripping people off for tons and tons of money. Jigsaw says that she has gotten over $8 million because of this scam. And all 34 people that she has scammed are now dead. Now, what is her trap? She is stuck in a room with a toxic nerve gas with her boyfriend, and she's in there for 10 minutes. There is one hole in the room where they could stick their head out and breathe clean air, but it's only one, so they have to fight over it. Only one of them gets to survive, and Cecilia comes out on top. Does she deserve to be tested? Absolutely. Did she deserve her fate? No, because she survives. Like, this is one of the top 5 most deserving of Saw traps in the entire franchise.
This is another terrifying urban legend that ended up being true, and I'm putting my Halloween frames on for this one. Back in the 90s, there was a legend in Mall, Switzerland that there was a creature lurking in the woods. He looked like a man, but he had a long black cape, gas mask, and was over 6 feet tall. At first, it was only the children who talked about seeing him in the woods, so all of the adults kind of just thought it was a legend, but then some of the parents started seeing him. One woman was just out for a walk with her child when she said that she saw him lurking in the woods looking at her. But one day, a photographer was out walking in the woods when he captured this photo. This is the only known photo of the creature in existence, a creature which they called Le Loyon. That photo goes viral, and afterwards, a woman walking through the woods finds a box with the gas mask and the cloak in it. There was also a note in the box from Le Loyon. And get this, he explains that he's not a monster. He was just an old hermit who would dress up to take mental health walks. And now there was so much attention on him, he was hanging up his cloak for good. You might not want Le Loyon's outfit, but if you want mine, you can use my code HEART15 for 15% off your first order with Pair Eyewear.
This is by far one of the worst murders in American history. This is the Watts family, and in the early hours of August 13th, 2018, Christopher Lee Watts murdered his pregnant wife Shannon by strangulation, and right after this, he murdered his 2 young daughters who are 4 and 3 by smothering them with a pillow, all while they begged their dad not to kill them. He then buried Shannon in a shallow grave near an oil storage facility, and he then dumped his 2 children's dead bodies into an oil tank. Christopher Watts initially maintained his innocence in his family's disappearance, but was arrested on August 15th after confessing in an interview with detectives to murdering Shannon, and he then later admitted to murdering his children. He did this because he wanted to run away and start a new life with a girl he was cheating on his wife with. And he thought the solution to this was to kill his entire family. There's also this clip of him being interviewed by some news outlet, and in the video he's begging for his wife and children to come back. Now at this point, nobody has any clue that he killed them, but he does. He remembers exactly what happened, he knows that they're dead, he knows how he killed them, and he's still on live TV begging them to come home, saying he can't live without them. Just watch this clip, it's absolutely sickening.
My last question, if you have any so feel free to step in. My last question, if your wife can see this, if she can watch these, what would you like to tell your wife and your kids?
Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like, if somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring her back.
That's it. I can take that mic off.
I am just so glad that I saw this comment because I've been waiting to cover the story of Sonny Bean, but I wasn't sure that you guys were ready, but I think you are now, so brace yourselves. So Alexander Sonny Bean was born in 15th century Scotland, and he grew up to be a leather maker, or a tanner, as it was called then. But when Sonny Bean fell in love with his new wife, they moved out to the countryside, and they decided to set up their home, but they didn't want to opt for any, like, old school timber frame house. No. They opted for the wow factor, and they moved into a cave that had loads of tunnels and secret passageways that extended like miles into the rock. So there's not a lot of work when you live in a cave in Ayrshire. So Sonny thought he would start robbing passersby to support his new wife in classic highwayman style, until he realized it would probably be better if he killed them too to cover his tracks. But he didn't stop there, because living in a cave requires a high protein diet. So they decided to eat the bodies as well. And soon the Beans began to produce little babies, 14 in total, raised on a strictly cannibalistic diet. It wasn't long before the Beanie Babies had Beanie Babies of their own through incest. So the Beans are multiplying rapidly, and their cannibal production line has evolved to an industrial scale. The family of 48 has perfected the art of hunting, butchering, salting, fermenting, cooking human beings. But all it took to bring the Beans tumbling down was a single messy hunt, resulting in a shoddily murdered woman with her husband and a horde of townspeople as witnesses. And they'd finally seen the Bean army with their own eyes after years of conjecture, and they weren't going to let another person go missing. So they went to the king. While the Beans cowered in their lair, the might of King James I, with an army of 400 men, descended on their cave, the biggest manhunt the country had ever seen. And what they found was just astounding. Miles deep into the cave, the wet, damp walls were just covered with rows upon rows of human limbs hanging in various states of preservation. And the ground was just covered in clothes and jewelry and bones, and then just these enormous cooking pots. All 48 Beanie Babies were marched to Edinburgh and sentenced to death. All 21 women were burned at the stake, and all 27 men were dismembered alive in the same manner that they killed their victims, of which it is estimated there were over 1,000. Have a good day!
Do you believe that people can be possessed by demons? Today we're going to be talking about a story where people claim that a woman was possessed. Let me know your thoughts at the end. Anneliese Michel grew up in West Germany in the 1960s. Her family was devout Catholic, and Anneliese herself went to Mass 2 times a week. She was very devoted to her religion. Anneliese had a couple of sisters, and her parents worked a lot, and this would often leave her and her younger siblings to stay with her grandmother, who was very Catholic, and would often force them to spend a lot of time reading the Bible. And many of the punishments that came from Anneliese's grandmother also were religious in nature. By the time Anneliese was in high school and 16 years old, she was starting to have these blackout episodes where she would walk around in almost a trance, having no memory of what had happened. These episodes would get worse, and there were times that Anneliese would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, and then black out again and have convulsions, like she was having a seizure. Anneliese's parents took her to a neurologist, and at first they were unable to find anything wrong. All of her typical scans came back normal. She was given some prescriptions and diagnosed with epilepsy, but these episodes got worse and worse, and eventually Anneliese started seeing things, like she was hallucinating things, and this started to lead her family to believe that it probably wasn't a medical issue that was going on, but more so that she was demon-possessed. Anneliese and her family did seek out the advice of their priests, and they mostly would encourage her to keep going the medical route, thinking that this was more so a medical issue than a demonic possession issue. Annalise would continue to take the medications that were prescribed to her, but they didn't seem to help. And by the time she got to college, she was still having these episodes, probably more frequently though. But Annalise did continue to take her medication, but then she said she started seeing demonic faces as she was walking around, and she could hear demonic voices speaking to her, saying that she would rot in hell for eternity and that she was damned and nobody could save her. It was at this point that Annalise and her family was fully convinced that she had actually been possessed by a demon and that this wasn't a medical issue. So they started pressing their priest for a exorcism or some kind of religious intervention, but all of the priests said that they needed permission from a bishop and that they should just continue the medical route because they all thought that this was a medical issue and not a demonic possession issue. But Annalise's family and Annalise herself continued to push the issue. I'll get into more in part 2. Give me a couple of minutes to film it and get it up. It'll be down in the comments.
All the bathrooms were taken.
What'd you do?
I went and peed outside.
When is somebody gonna catch you?
Peeing outside?
I got him.
If it's on your own property, can you get in trouble?
There's nudity. Yeah, that's nudity in a public area.
But it's a private area.
That's indecent exposure.
But I'm on my private land.
Still public though if you're outside.
You can get in trouble for display of nudity like behind glass in your home.
That's silly.
I want all my neighbors to see me.
Wait a second.
Just a kid riding his bike by. Oh, there's Mr. Hooper's. Oh no!
Uncle Carl!
If it's your property, you should be able to do whatever you want.
Okay.
Ada's walking by someone's house. Dude's in the window.
No, he's mowing the lawn. Dude.
It's his land.
It's his land.
Ada, look away.
Yeah, just don't look.
This is America.
We're not going to walk past his house. But this is America, and that is his right.
And I respect you, sir. I want to shake your hand.
Never Tell Me the Odds, Part 38. In the 1990s, the FBI knew there was a double agent within the Bureau, and they assigned Robert Hansen the task of finding him. It was later discovered that Hansen was the double agent they were looking for, and had been working with the KGB since 1979 in what was possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. He was serving out 15 life sentences without the possibility of parole until he died earlier this year. An electric company in Arkansas was forced to post this PSA after somebody took out a power line with an unbelievable arrow shot. This 3,000-year-old clay pig was found 2 years ago at the Lian ruins of China. Internet users immediately pointed out that it looked exactly like the pigs from Angry Birds. New Jersey grandma Patricia DeMoro walked up to a craps table with $100 at an Atlantic City casino. Over 4 hours later, she'd set the world record for craps rolls at 154, shattering the previous record of 118. Her winnings were not disclosed to the public, but the odds of accomplishing what she did were about 1 in 1.56 trillion.